It's 6 p.m. Eastern. It's time for the Daily Wrap. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, joined by my co-host and the whistleblower who bought down Enron. Who knew? Forbes columnist Rick Unger is here and proud.
Very busy
Also, she is one of Philadelphia's top attorneys and former star of MTV's Real World, the Las Vegas season that was full of all sorts of controversy. Heather Hansen. And finally, she's one of Long Island's finest and co-host of Close Encounter, Lisa Janovich, joins us. Welcome all. It's time for the Daily Download. And today, a group claiming to be Yemeni branch of ISIS carried out a series of suicide bombings in the capital city of Sana'a. All told, 137 people are dead, 345 others injured. The attack occurred at two mosques during midday prayers. Josh Earnest at the White House press briefing today said there's no indication ISIS had anything to do with it.
I can tell you that we cannot at this point confirm the veracity of the claim of these extremists that they are affiliated with the Islamic State. We have seen these kinds of claims in the past from other extremist groups. It does appear that these kinds of claims are often made for a perception that they have that it benefits their propaganda efforts.
The White House press secretary continues.
There is not at this point clear evidence of a operational link between these extremists in Yemen and ISIL fighters in Iraq and Syria. But what is clear is that the United States and our coalition partners are very aware of just how dangerous the ideology and tactics of ISIL are.
Okay, so if this was in fact ISIS, this would be the first attack in Yemen. President Obama last fall used Yemen as an example of success in his strategy to fight the war on terror.
This strategy of taking out terrorists who threaten us while supporting partners on the front lines is one that we have successfully pursued in Yemen and Somalia for years, and it is consistent with the approach I outlined earlier this year, to use force against anyone who threatens America's core interests, but to mobilize partners wherever possible to address broader challenges to international order.
Yes, but it has been a hotbed for al-Qaeda and teeters on the edge of stability as Shia and Sunnis fight for control. Let's bring in former SEAL and special agent to the FBI and now president of the security firm Continued Services, Jonathan Gilliam. Jonathan, earlier this week, a museum in Tunisia was attacked, and ISIS claimed responsibility for murdering 24 people. Now they claim responsibility for the attack in Yemen as well. First question to you, do you think it was ISIS or al-Qaeda, or does it really matter on a global scale?
Well, I mean, it could have been ISIS or al-Qaeda. I mean, the fact is that they're Sunni, and the Shias are who now rule in Yemen, which are backed by Iran. So it very well could have been them. I think regardless of the fact whether it is or not, and even the fact that it's Sunni or Shia, we're still looking at another action from fundamental Islamic Mohammedism. I mean, that's a fact. It doesn't even matter if they're attacking each other. Ultimately, it's the same tactics, the same roots that are spreading all over the world. And politicians consistently get spun up and try to figure out who it was, when the reality is it's just another sign of the failed war on terror overall and globally.
You know, Jonathan, it's Heather Hansen here. You talked about whether they're attacking each other. Today, al-Qaeda came out and actually condemned the attack because it happened in a mosque and said that they abhor this and they think that it's unlawful, quote unquote. If they were to suddenly get in competition with each other, what impact would that have on our fight with them?
Well, you're talking about al-Qaeda and ISIS?
Yes, yeah.
Well, they were at one point not really friendly. Now in certain places they've kind of swore allegiance or have worked, so I wouldn't say together necessarily, but you have to look at who the fighters are. The power struggle would be in the hierarchy, but the reality is, the people that are actually doing the ground fighting, they may go from one to the other depending on who's around their area and their location. Again, this is the fight is really a bigger picture, and we need to look at overall the movement of how Islamic fundamentalism is spreading around the world. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Jonathan, it's Rick. I gotta ask you this. It seems to me, and I guess we don't really know. I understand Heather tells us that Al Qaeda abhorred it, although they have bombed mosques before, but not very often. It seems to me that this could be more about the political things going on in Yemen. Look, the people who were hit today were the Houthis, who were the Shia sect that overthrew the Sunni government in Yemen a few months ago, sent the president of the country off into exile. And they are the sworn enemy of Al Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula. Don't you have to wonder if this might not have been a political situation where they're trying to get that Sunni leader back in power? He is still claiming to be president of the country.
I mean, that's a very good possibility. I mean, you got to look at the fact that this conflict is going on in Yemen. It also shows you the importance of Yemen and why they would be battling for a country that if you visited it, you would think, why is anybody fighting over this territory? I mean, the reality is what goes on in Yemen and its location is very crucial to their fight. And Yemen is kind of like a lawless location for them to stage attacks that go on around the world and also train people.
Jonathan, I wonder if it's Joe again. If ISIS isn't stepping too far here. I mean, every terrorist campaign and every terror attack like this is obviously way too much when just innocent people, 137 in this case, are killed. But by going into a mosque and actually attacking that during midday prayers, and then seeing what happened in Egypt with 21 Christians being beheaded, and seeing what happened to that Jordanian pilot burned alive, are they now risking being counterattacked by other Arab countries, other folks that aren't evil Westerners and Americans? In other words, I don't know if they're doing themselves too many favors here by going after a mosque and angering all the folks in the Muslim world by doing so.
Well, you got to look at two things. You got to look at where the split comes from. The Sunni and Shia split's over, almost 1,400 years old. That's not going to go away anytime soon, regardless. But you have to realize when you say Arab nations, the fact is, ISIS is not really a nation. It's a group of people, and they're doing unconventional war. So it really doesn't matter what other people think about it. The likelihood of them doing an effective strike against ISIS is about as successful as us carrying out a bombing attack to stop terrorism.
And we'll have to end it there. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insight. And coming up next, Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz made a big mistake with his Race Together campaign. Did he? Well, we'll discuss that. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, along with my co-host Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and Lisa Jandovitz. So yesterday, during my potluck, I mentioned Starbucks Race Together campaign, an incentive courtesy of CEO Howard Schultz, not to be confused with Charles M. Schultz, who asked company baristas to write Race Together on customers' cups to stimulate a week of national dialogue about race. In addition to Race Together being written on the coffee cups, Starbucks also giving out this Race Together newspaper. Yes, we have our own copy right here. Newspapers still do exist, young people. This is all part of a joint effort with USA Today that explains why Schultz wanted to do the campaign.
The country is being torn apart by racial injustice and a level of racism that we haven't seen publicly for a very long time. I think Starbucks has had a long history of recognizing that we have a national footprint, and we want to answer the question in the affirmative: can we use our scale for good? All we're trying to do is potentially do something catalytic to start a conversation.
Jim Cramer also followed up by saying, buy Starbucks stock or something to that effect. But the backlash against Starbucks and Schultz has been huge. Twitter exploding with comments, including this one from Jameel Smith, who writes for The New Republic. The only folks happy about Starbucks baristas discussing race with customers are the suits who run it. Feel-good liberalism at its worst. Our friend Ron Christie wrote in the Daily Beast, but just as I don't want the government to facilitate discussions whether I like it or not, the same applies to this idea that Starbucks employees should be forcing their customers to do the same when all they wanted, just like me and my potluck yesterday was a cup of coffee and a break from the routine of their day. Elsewhere on social media, people have called for a boycott of Starbucks. Gang, as we briefly talked about it yesterday, I thought this was a huge mistake, even though the intentions were well placed by the CEO.
People, you know, this has become so endemic in this country. People get a little too carried away with this. It was well intended. I happen to agree it wasn't the best plan in the world. As I said yesterday, you know, if you're having a conversation with your barista about race or anything else, and I'm waiting for my coffee, we got a big problem. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense. But for people overreacting, look, the man is a good corporate citizen. He has best intentions, so, you know, just nicely say, this isn't a great idea.
Don't you think, even though it was a horrible idea and the execution worse, right, to put these poor baristas who are making $10 an hour, you know what, now we want you to have a dialogue about race, like their job isn't horrible enough already that they have to go into that whole awkward conversation.
They like their jobs.
I know, well, maybe.
It's not horrible.
Well, it's not the greatest either. I mean, you got to get up early for starters. People like their coffee early. That's no good.
Well, we do that.
Anyway, there was a question here somewhere. I mean, boycott? What? Boycott because they tried to do something good for the country?
Well, and I think it's easier for corporations to stay silent than to speak out in some way. But I do think, and you know, we've talked about this when the George Zimmerman trial was coming, because I'm a lawyer. Oftentimes, I'm asked to talk about these things: the George Zimmerman trial, and then the whole thing in Ferguson, and then Eric Garner. And we talk about these things only in response to some sort of tragedy. And I do think it's a great idea to talk about it when there isn't a tragedy. But a better focus might have been like a town hall at Starbucks on a Monday night to talk about these things, and then that way people who are there want to be there, because you can't force the conversation. You have to have people who want to engage, who might be curious, who might be afraid otherwise. So I think that there's ways to do this, and it is a good idea. This was not the way to do it. I do think a boycott's a little much.
You can't do a town hall, for starters, at Starbucks, only because it fits like 15 people. I mean, a lot of them are very, very small. Here's the thing. I want to ask you this before you give your perspective, Lisa. You know where there aren't Starbucks in this country?
Selma, Alabama.
Selma, Alabama, and Ferguson, Missouri.
really?
So if I'm Starbucks and I want to start a national conversation about race, I might want to put,
you
because
might wanna
there's 70 within a mile radius of where we are in New York right now.
Right,
I
right.
want to put
Every
two in
other
there
block.
first, because that was the easiest thing to find out for journalists. Like,
Exactly.
put your money where your mouth is. Go ahead.
You know, and it may be a very good idea, and I'm sure he's a good man, but I saw it as a little bit opportunistic. Using the topic of race relations, which is huge right now, and trying to tie it to their brand. And there are cases where that works very effectively, for instance, with something like Dove and their campaign Real Beauty, where they used real women, not stick figure women, and in their advertisements on television.
Opportunistic too.
No, because it ties in with their brand of
just
showing
like
what
their
beauty.
opportunism.
No, but what does race relations have to do with lattes and coffee? It
It's a
doesn't.
positive effort.
It doesn't
It's-
really.
It's a positive effort in a place where no one
positive effort.
speaks, though. It's not like there's ever dialogue in the
Oh,
first
I
place.
speak with it. I know the people, the baristas. I go in every day, and I know the same ones, and we talk about things, but we don't go over to the side and have a talk about
You
race
really
relations.
don't think, Lisa, honestly, that Dunkin' Donuts is better? Because it really is. I mean, it's so much more
Starbucks
sweeter.
person, and I talk to my Starbucks
This
people
dovetails with the next thing we're going to talk about in the
Yes.
next segment. People lighten up, have a little fun. This is not the end of the
But it's
world.
not-
Well, you're right.
It's
His
not-
reaction has
not
been
be,
very
you know,
vitriolic.
But
No.
Rick, this isn't necessarily a fun conversation
Right,
for
it's
people.
not.
It can be,
No, I
it
get
can be
it.
really uncomfortable
But
for some
very
people.
uncomfortable.
But I could have a
It's
fun
not that
conversation right
intense.
now.
Yeah.
So let's ask
Oh,
the
we're gonna
questions
take the
they have
test.
on the back, shall we? Your race relations reality check. Where do you stand? Okay, so Rick, question number 6. In my Facebook stream, do you have Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, in my Facebook stream, blank percent are of a different race.
How could I possibly know that? Because I just read their names when they write to me. I have no idea. And even if I was noticing that, I would not count how
Right,
many
right,
of my
no.
friends are black and how many are white and how many are something
Heather,
else.
could you imagine actually going through? I have something like 874 Facebook friends. I
Right.
know
That's
maybe
all.
14 of them.
That's all.
But imagine going through every single
and
one,
looking
and
to see-
I got
right.
16.9%. Are you Latino or are you?
That
Right.
seems
Well,
racist.
It's
That
crazy.
does
That's what I
seem
said.
racist.
The
Okay.
question is racist. I
Yeah.
agree.
Next question, Heather, you get this one. In the past year, comma, someone of a different race has been to my home blank times.
Oh my goodness.
Been to
Did
my
you
home
count?
blank
I couldn't
times.
tell you. More than 15, less than 50.
Wow, that's quite a range. Okay. Lisa, you get the next
How many
one.
kinds of white people come to this?
Lisa, do you have children?
Probably the same.
Yes.
Okay, you get the next question. My children have blank friends of a different race. My children have blank friends of a different race.
Yes. Is it a yes or no, or is it
No,
no?
no, it's a number.
I don't even know how many. I don't know how many because there's a number of them that they have through school. Through
You know
work.
what the trick is here?
I don't
Seriously,
know.
if you can answer it with a number, they're
Then-
telling you there's
Right,
something
Yes.
wrong.
Right.
Okay,
That's
go.
the
Second
setup.
question you could ask me.
My parents had blank friends of a different race.
Now, when we define race, do we include the Germans? Like, is that a different race?
That's not a race.
Oh, you mean?
like,
oh, really?
yeah.
I thought it was like an
that's
Aryan thing.
it's not a race.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I will say my mother's passed away, as I've mentioned on the show, so that's kind of a leading question, right? Maybe be a little sensitive and say parent or parents. So I don't like that test one bit. I'm not answering the question on their behalf.
Big trouble.
Anyway,
here.
we got to go. And by the way, check out these coffee cups, courtesy of Tracy Diamond Designs. Anyway, coming up next, does America suffer from a fund deficit? A former First Lady believes we do. Find out next. This is the Daily Wrap only on Newsmax TV.